Welcome to Who's in STEM. I'm Ken Ono, your host and the STEM advisor to the provost and the Marvin Rosenblum Professor of Mathematics at UVA. Our goal is to evoke flights of imagination and wonder by showcasing the cornucopia of all that is STEM at UVA, the marvelous world of UVA science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. Now, today's episode is really special. And we will celebrate the achievements of 3 star junior faculty that the university is very proud are on grounds. And sort of to set the stage for what I mean by that, let me take you back in time to 1993. In 1993, I defended my PhD thesis at UCLA, and I felt an overwhelming lack of confidence, and that is an understatement. My hope was that at least 4 people in the world would care about my work in number theory. Coincidentally, there were indeed 4 individuals on my committee, and they held my future in their hands. And I'm profoundly grateful that they passed me. However, even after defending my thesis, I couldn't shake the belief that I didn't have what it takes to be a successful scientist. There was no evidence to suggest otherwise. That year, I applied for nearly 200 university positions, and the harsh reality is that I didn't get a single interview. This experience of rejection only reinforced my belief that I was an imposter. Somehow, I pieced together a series of 1-year postdoctoral appointments which just kept my dreams of an academic career alive just long enough to leave open the chance that I might be able to produce work that mattered to someone. For me, I was very lucky, and it actually did come in a flash of insight. And I'm so grateful that because of those opportunities, I was able to solve a 100-year-old conjecture in mathematics that actually even made world news, if you can believe that. And a few months later, I was stunned to receive an invitation from the White House because I had been selected as one of 60 scientists nationwide to receive an award called the PECASE, the Presidential Early Career Award for Scientists and Engineers. This honor represents the highest recognition that's awarded to beginning researchers in STEM fields by the federal government. I received my prize from Bill Clinton at the White House, and while as cool as it was to go to the White House, what was really important was the recognition from peers who saw value in my work and who had recommended me for this prize. It was as if I transitioned from imposter to expert overnight. Now, I believe that the 3 guests that we have today probably experienced something similar. Today, we proudly celebrate the achievements of 3 faculty members who have just been awarded PECASE Awards in 2025. James Jimmy Burns, Coleen Carrigan, and Liheng Cai. As a new member of the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering myself as an affiliate professor, I couldn't be more thrilled with these 3 scientists because they're being recognized for their works that speak to engineers. So Jimmy, Coleen, Liheng, welcome to Who's in STEM.
Great to be here.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you, Ken.
Where to start? What was going through your mind when you found out that you were receiving a prize from the president?
Yeah, I was really excited. I think I wasn't expecting that. And so it was almost just deleted the email because it was from the NASA director and it seemed kind of fishy. But as I read into it and clicked on the link, which was probably a bad idea, I saw that it was something official. And, honestly, what was going through my mind is I was just very, very thankful to the mentors that I had and opportunities that I've gotten through my time in the U.S. Air Force and here at UVA. And I've just been very blessed by that. And so I think probably the biggest thing going through my mind was being thankful.
Coleen, what was going through your mind?
I was in absolute shock. Like Jimmy, I at first didn't believe it. And then when it started to sink in, I just was shaking. And then the next thought was, how can I share this with the people that made this possible?
Liheng, your thoughts?
Yeah, so I knew this was going to happen. I think that was many months ago. That was last year when the officials reached out to me asking for information for the background check. So then I emailed my program officer from SF. They told me that they just nominated me like 2 years ago. So it's a really long process. So I know it's coming, but it's good to know it's going to be finalized.
Yeah, you always wonder, it's not like the check's in the mail. And certainly the email isn't like the email you get from the Nigerian prince promising great prizes. This is a big deal. This is a big deal. Now, the three of you, and you do very different things in your research, and I'd like to talk about that. I certainly want to begin with that. So, Coleen, tell us about your research. What are you being recognized for with the PECASE?
Well, I am a feminist anthropologist, and I study women and non-binary practitioners who navigate male-dominated fields. And I am lucky enough to have been able to have the skills to do this because really early on in my undergraduate career, I had an internship, a full-time internship at the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor. And I got to not only read quantitative research on labor stratifications in our economy and our U.S. workforce, but I also got to hear stories from thousands of women workers who were navigating non-traditional fields. And their stories really moved me, and it made me realize that that's what I wanted to do for a living, which is amplify those stories and study it as theory so I can make change in the U.S. labor economy. And so now I put myself through grad school as an anthropologist, but I worked as a research associate at a National Science Foundation Advanced Center, which is to advance women faculty in STEM. And so very early on in my graduate career, I got to be a part of this social movement to broaden participation in science and engineering, particularly in engineering. And I got to be part of monthly mentorship lunches. I got to be part of quarterly leadership development, professional development events. And so very early on, I got this mentorship from a lot of women in science and engineering that has helped me in my own career. And so I'm trying to give back to those pioneers who have persisted in science and engineering despite significant barriers of because of race and gender and sexuality and socioeconomic status. And so having the tools from anthropology where you can collect people's stories and gather them together to create theory, and then that theory can be put back into the world to help other people navigate those problems and find solutions to them. I'm just feeling so grateful for the past 20 years having been part of this movement. From other feminist leaders to be able to give back to society and help make our labor force safe and equitable to all workers.
So with the PECASE Award, the work will go on, and do you have a project or a program that we can look forward to over the next couple of years?
Absolutely. My lab, Valuing the Social in Computing, which is mostly an undergraduate lab, and I just finished, I published a book, Cracking the Bro Code, last year, which codifies the theory that I just mentioned. And the PECASE hopefully will bring recognition to the people that make my research possible, which are the women, non-binary practitioners, and male allies who support diversity, equity, and inclusion in science and engineering. And I'm hoping then to also write a second book. And my second book, the working title right now is Dethroning Bro Code Bosses. So my contribution of theorizing on the Bro Code and how it operates not only in cultures of high tech, but how those cultures of high tech are then exported to broader society. I'm hoping that my theories, especially in my second book too, will help make change in U.S. society.
Thank you, Coleen. So did everyone catch that? The book is called Cracking the Bro Code. It reminds me of a recent episode that we had with Mar Hicks and Margot Lee Shetterly. So this kind of work parallels their work. And so for listeners who remember that, or maybe for those who don't remember that, go back and listen to that episode, because we were talking then about the problem of the hidden figures. There was a famous movie called Hidden Figures based on Margot Lee's book, largely centering on 4 or 5 African-American women who were the human computers in NASA. But for the 4 of them that became famous, there are thousands whose stories remain untold. And this is the very valuable work of Mar Hicks and Margot moving forward. So it's wonderful, Coleen, that in the spirit of these initiatives that you're here leading the way. Liheng, congratulations. Tell us about your work. What are you known for?
Oh, yeah, sure. So I work in the area of soft biomaterials, and some examples has ice cream and a steak. Those are examples, right? In particular, we work on a material called elastomer or rubber. So since Charles Goodyear invented the rubber, that was about like 200 years ago. We know that when you make a soft rubber, they become more stretchable. Or in other words, is that so if you make a stiffer rubber, they become less stretchable. Now people know that stiffer materials are less stretchable. So we were trying to solve this challenge over the past many years. And about 5 years ago, we thought we have an idea on how to solve this one. Then we wrote a proposal. Then this proposal was supported by the NSF Career Award. Mm-hmm. So after 5 years of work, we saw, okay, this idea is true, right? We can show this idea really works. That's really what really allows to really gain this recognition. Yeah.
So the idea is a new process in manufacturing?
The idea is that is a new fundamental design principle. It's not really about engineering, it's about really a scientific innovation. Mm-hmm. Is trying to find new ways to use different building blocks to make networks, to make rubber. Mm-hmm. So we found that if you try to engineer two things. One is what I call a molecular weight, mm-hmm. Which determines how stiff the materials it is. The second one is the length scales they can store, right? Mm-hmm. So basically, we design a very special molecule which can have the molecular weight and the length they store independently controlled. Then we can use them together to have them sort of assemble to a network, make a rubber, which can be stretched by nearly 30 times, which is really amazing. Yeah.
So help us picture, perhaps by giving examples, where would this material be put to use in our daily lives moving forward? Where can we expect to see Professor Cai's material at home?
Yeah, so now you can use this really for many cases because the elastomers or like a rubber, they are sort of like so prevalent in the modern society that the major components of the automobile, such as tires, right, they are also being used as the major components of this like home appliances. So basically, anything you want to interface, you want to have something that's soft and compliant, but also stretchable. So now we are trying to use this material to make stretchable electronics, software robots, and also we're trying to make them use 3D printing to make the different architectures. In addition, we use them as medical devices. Yeah.
So everywhere.
Yeah, basically This will really change the way how people make rubber fundamentally.
Thank you for sharing that. Jimmy, your work. Give us an overview of your work as a NASA NSF-funded scientist.
Happy to do so. And so I sit in the material science and engineering department, which is sometimes kind of a forgotten figure in the engineering school. Folks know what mechanical engineering, electrical engineering is, but the material science department is cool because it kind of touches on everything. And so the work that I do within the material science department is focusing on the role of environment on the structural integrity of metallic components, right? And what's neat about that is that has a role of materials, a role of mechanics, and a role of chemistry. And so you can say, man, that's complex, but that's also reality, which then makes it kind of a fun projects to be able to work on, right? And what we try to do is ensure structural integrity. So if you're flying on the plane, you hope some smart people, smarter than me, are out there making sure the plane wing doesn't fall off, right? You want it to have structural integrity. And that's true in a whole bunch of different applications, whether it be the automotive world, the marine world, the aerospace world, biomedical. If you have a hip replacement, that's a metal, titanium typically, inside an environment under load. So how does the material respond? When does it break? And that sort of thing. It's in the oil and gas, the nuclear community. It's kind of neat. One of the big things now is the hydrogen fuel economy. You want to have a hydrogen fuel economy, you have to transport that hydrogen. That embrittles materials, causes degradation of structural integrity. So, one of the things I probably what I got the award for was from NASA, and it's actually relevant to the space station as well. And so there's a project that we've been working on. Unfortunately, there was a material system used on a part of the space station that was prone to environmental cracking. And I've been very blessed to be able to be a subject matter expert to help provide guidance on it's actually really a neat thing of how academia can provide relevance. For about 15 years, actually for a Navy program, we worked on this aluminum magnesium alloy systems and environmental cracking on those to understand the mechanisms, what's caused it, all the way down to the atomistics of causing decohesion of two interfaces, right? And now we are have been able to harness all that good work that was done at UVA to be able to provide engineering support to the NASA engineers as they try to navigate this challenging problem.
So I think of Skylab, which crashed into the ocean after a few years of orbiting Earth. But then I think you're speaking of things like the International Space Station. Let's talk a little bit about the environment in which that device has to survive. It's very different from what we expect of our materials here on Earth. So what are the challenges that you face that makes your work on these alloys so critical?
You know, the answer might not be quite as sexy as you think, right? And so
Well, I want to go out in outer space, right? So that's a whole lot of nothing and vacuum.
Sure.
So that sounds pretty sexy to me.
Yeah, and but it's a little bit more innocuous than that. It's actually a problem that is likely arising from the fact that on the interior of the space station, you need to have astronauts there, right? And they need to be able to live in air, in a humidity-controlled environment, and that kind of stuff. And as they are there, you have perspiration, you have sweat, you have things dissolve that can deposit. As that deposits, you can have deliquescence, which if you ever go out to your car in the morning time or something like that, it hasn't rained, but maybe there's a thin film of electrolyte there, right? Now, all of a sudden, you're in space. On the outside, it's really cold, it's really dry. But on the inside, maybe you have a small electrolyte that can then interact with the material under a given load. So again, mechanics, materials, environment. And then that causes these issues. And so it's been very fun to work with experts on in environmental control, experts on all of these different things within the NASA community, and then be able to provide a small part of knowledge base that we have from a material science perspective to provide insights into the cracking behavior.
I see. So I obviously had it completely wrong. I was imagining that it would be the radiation from the sun that would be destroying the integrity of the skin, the shell of the space station. But yeah, I imagine that what you describe is clearly a much more difficult problem.
Not quite as sexy as that, but I guess it, sometimes the real problems, solving the real problems, are just dealing with issues that we've known about for a long time, but just in a different context. And so what's kind of fun about that, that's one aspect of what we do, but we work with the Navy on environmental cracking on boats and a big program on airframes and look at stress corrosion cracking and nuclear storage casks. And what's fun, and I've kind of given my pitch to people, anybody that would want to work with us, is, we do stuff that then integrates into so many different disciplines. And that's kind of cool about material science overall, but also kind of an interesting thing about the environmental cracking specific discipline.
Great. Well, thank you, Jimmy. So as you've heard from our three scientists, that the work spans here at UVA. It's incredible in its range, from an anthropologist studying culture in STEM fields and in engineering to a biomaterials expert to an engineer studying the integrity of space stations. That's what we have here at UVA, and it is really amazing. So thank you for sharing. So I have the feeling that your personal stories are probably just as diverse as your research. And I kind of want to touch on that. Whether you recognize it or not, with this great honor, you now will serve as role models for your students and other faculty and the university, of course. And so I think it would be a good opportunity for us to talk about your personal stories, your career journeys. What sparked your passion? How did you navigate your way to your current position here as a world-leading scholar? Maybe we'll lead off with you, Liheng.
Oh, yeah, sure. So I changed my fields almost 3 times during my career. So when I was undergraduate in college, I studied physics, theoretical physics. Basically, I just calculations, mathematical equations, and that's what I do. But then I realized...
You didn't like it? It breaks my heart, but okay.
I did really well, though, and I like it very much. Mm-hmm. But then I also learned biology a little bit. I thought really the future is biology, right? So, but then there was really a dilemma, because biology deals with molecules and cells, whereas physics deal with like atoms and quantum like electrons, which are of different length scales. They are so different. So then, can I do something in between? Then I was thinking about something that can bridge the length scales from this kind of atoms or molecules to the cells. Then I choose polymers. Polymers is just like a proteins, is kind of like a long stringy molecules which connected by molecules. So then I decided to go to polymers for my grad study. This is the one time I changed field, right? Changed my field. During this time, I did two things. One is still doing the theory, doing the calculations on how to predict the behavior and the properties of polymers. On the other hand, I managed to work with a doctor from medical school to work on the human lung defense. Basically, the question was that as we are talking, right, we have to breathe. And this process brings in numerous infectious particles in the lung. How do the lung?
I try not to think about that, but okay, yeah.
But how do the lung fight against them, right? So as long as this is really a long-standing question. So I was able to use the concept and the knowledge from the polymers as soft matter to make a discovery. And the discovery was really published in Science as cover article. That's from my PhD work. So I was
and
also.
Where did you do that?
That was like UNC Chapel Hill. Chapel Hill. I was really lucky to work with a polymer physicist, Michael Rubinstein, and he's one of the world's best polymer physicist theoreticians. And he wrote a textbook on polymer physics, which is basically used worldwide. But then, when you discover something by experiments is so important and so interesting, then you realize, okay, you need to do something else, right? Then I say experiments are more interesting, are more fascinating. Then I decided to switch again. So during my postdoc training, I just switched from theory to experiments only. So I did a very long postdoc, about like 4.5 years at Harvard, right? With a professor specialized in soft matter and also many experiments. And after that, then I realized that, okay, so I can become independent to do my own lab. Now my lab like focus on experiments, but I use a theory as a hobby, yeah.
But would you classify yourself as an experimental engineer or more of a producer of materials?
So I wouldn't call I'm like an engineer. I would call them a scientist, right? So we are trying to really solve fundamental challenges. Mm-hmm. In the meantime, we use engineering processes to make them useful.
I see. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Great. Well, Coleen, your passion, your path, your story?
Well, I grew up in my parents' bookstore, Notes and Quotes. So I've been working at a bookstore since I was a little kid, being surrounded by books from a young age and having access to unlimited books from my folks really inspired me to want to become a writer. I remember being a little kid pointing at the bookshelf saying, I want to be a doctor of books, even before I really knew what that meant. And then I went on to study at College of Holy Cross. I studied English. And I was very active in the feminist movement there, trying to make sure that women have the same opportunities, respect, and regard in higher education. I did a full-time internship, as I mentioned, at the Women's Bureau of the Department of Labor, and that's what really got me interested in studying cultures in non-traditional fields. And so after I did my capstone based on that internship experience, which won an award, I went to work for big tech, moved to Seattle, and worked at a very famous big tech corporation. And that's when I realized that all the theory that I had written and studied about and written my capstone on, sexual harassment in male-dominated fields, wage gap, I was experiencing it personally. So I realized what theory became my own lived experience. So when I wanted to go back to grad school, I used that as a way to become an anthropologist, where you can turn stories into theory and then apply that theory back onto the world to make meaning and understanding of it so you can make change. So I put myself through grad school being a research associate at that NSF Advanced Center, and that's when I realized that one of the most powerful, lucrative occupations in the world was extremely sexist and barred great minds from contributing to it. What also bothered me, too, is that the people who persisted in computer science and engineering were doing so under duress. And so there's a lot of theories about why white men are overrepresented in computer science. And one of the theories that I tried to contribute to and try to contribute new knowledge to that is two things. One, there's a large gap between what computer science says it does in the world and what it actually does. For example, for 40 years now, big tech corporations have claimed that they are changing the world for good and socially revolutionary. But then the practitioners who want to use their technical skills to change the world get into these fields, get into these corporations, and are stymied from doing so. And actually there's derision towards people who want to use their technical skills for social good within big tech fields. Secondly, sexual harassment is an extreme problem in computer science and engineering. It's second only to the military in terms of the tolerance of sexual harassment. So even if not everybody is harassing historically disenfranchised people in computer science, there's a tolerance of it. So good people doing nothing is a serious problem in computer science. So I try to contribute by showing, there's a huge gap between what big tech says it does for the world, what it's actually doing, and how people who are trying to fulfill the promise that it's promising the public are actually being deterred. And secondly, we can no longer tolerate harassment in these fields in order for us to have a society that is built by technologists who look like the broader society that we live in.
There's so much to unpack there. Coleen, thank you for doing this very important work. I think I need to share a personal story, not about some of the students that we have advised here at the University of Virginia, and maybe in particular some of the students that I've worked with. Some of our best students that we're most proud of, women who go on into work in fields like AI, computer science, in places even like Stanford, are struggling. And maybe I'll mention one of my students in particular. She actually won a Rhodes Scholarship. She won a prize called the Morgan Prize. And she's pursuing both a PhD in mathematics at Stanford and a law degree at Stanford right now simultaneously as a Knight Hennessy Scholar. This should be someone who is a superstar by every measure at every university in the world. And we had this Zoom meeting yesterday as part of this group that's working on mathematical benchmarks that are assessing the skills of large language models. And she was talked down, despite the fact she was probably one of the 2 or 3 smartest people in the Zoom meeting. It was horrible to sit there and watch that, to see that there's this culture that still can impact all of this work. So thank you for doing your work. What kind of advice can you offer me as I try to comfort my former student?
Well, I think what I mentioned earlier is that we can no longer tolerate this type of harassment that you witnessed on the Zoom call. You have a brilliant mind that's persisting despite significant barriers, social, emotional, and systemic barriers, to contribute her brilliance to this field, and you see her being denigrated in real time. So I would just suggest next time you witness someone being talked over, someone's ideas being ignored, someone having their ideas stolen in a meeting. Those are 3 very common microaggressions and forms of violence that I experienced myself in big tech and that I've studied and theorized and fortunately heard from hundreds and hundreds of people, that you can make a difference, Ken, by just saying, hold on one second. I think, didn't Coleen just mention that 2 minutes ago? Let's give her credit for that idea and then continue to brainstorm on it. Or, hold on one second, Jimmy. Coleen was in the middle of her sentence there. Let's have her finish there, and then we can talk, and then you can have the floor. So just it takes practice and it takes courage, because once you start being an ally for people who have been historically disenfranchised from engineering, you then become the target as well. But if you have a critical mass of allies, then those brilliant minds can make those contributions without an expense at their health.
Thank you, Coleen. Jimmy, your path. I think you said it a moment ago that your path wasn't direct to the University of Virginia through graduate school. So tell us.
Yeah, and so I had actually went to grew up. Family is from the Midwest, so we're a typical Midwest family. But then when I was young, we moved out to around Washington, D.C., and
so Midwest means Illinois.
Illinois, yes, yeah, in Illinois, and so we moved around to D.C. and I never really had a whole lot of interest or thought of being in the military, but there was opportunity. I played football at the Air Force Academy, and so there was an opportunity to play football there, and I went out and had a wonderful experience. They have a fantastic engineering program. I actually, I had a minor in math too, so maybe we can talk about some differential equations after the meeting. And so after that, I served in the military, had a fantastic experience in the military, was very blessed with some neat assignments, working on the C-130 in the time right after the 9/11, so felt like you could really make a difference on getting the planes back up in the air for important missions. And then, I I guess I'm one of 5 kids, so traditional Irish Catholic Midwestern family. And everybody besides me went to UVA for their undergrad. So my brother played football here. He was a Dratty Award winner and nuclear engineer with a 4.0. And so kind of a non-traditional academic path similar to mine at the academy. And my little sister played lacrosse here, and my 2 other sisters were engineers here as well. And so anyway, so by the time when I was in the military, I had an opportunity to do selected for a program to go back to get my graduate degree here. And so once I finally came to UVA, they let me sit at the big kids table at Thanksgiving. And so I finally made my way back here. And so then I kind of completed my PhD program, quote unquote, in night school, just in my spare time, while I was still in active duty at the Air Force Research Lab. And so that potentially gives me maybe a little less empathy for some of my graduate students when they are complaining about how hard they're working. But hopefully we still treat them fairly. And anyway, so after that, when I separated from the military, it was really I never had any interest in being in academia. But as I was exploring things, I just had such a fantastic mentor, Rick Gangloff, that I worked with on my master's degree, and then he very selflessly worked with me as I was kind of doing my night school PhD.
I'm sorry, I'm still trying to wrap my mind around the night school PhD part.
Essentially, I was in the military. I had my full-time job with my military responsibilities, my responsibilities at the Air Force Research Lab. But as part of your job, they want you about 20% of your time to be on the bench doing research. And I was able to set up a configuration with Rick and my leadership in the military to be able to have that count to my PhD. So clearly, you're not getting a PhD in 20% of your time, and so that required a lot of additional work to be able to make it through there. But thankfully I did, and it was very well worth it. And then I came back, and no interest in being in academia, but Rick Gangloff and John Scully and Rob Kelly in the Center for Electrochemical Science and Engineering had an opportunity for a research professorship. And once I got back here, and I just fell in love with teaching. I fell in love with the kind of entrepreneurial side of being an academic. You have to have an idea, and you have to pitch the idea and work with folks and bring students in and get them excited about it. And it has opened up a lot of opportunities, and I'm very, very thankful for those opportunities. So I love it here at UVA.
So Jimmy, thank you for sharing. You brought up an important point. You're passionate about working with students. You have your lab. I'm going to ask all of you the same question. How can interested students learn about your work and perhaps get involved in your lab?
Yeah, well, I feel like I don't want to share this with everybody. I feel like I have a little bit of the cheat code because I teach a intro to MSc, which is a big material science class. And so, that's typically a first-year class. And so I'm able to get some awesome undergraduate students, that get excited about material science. And, I like to bring in a whole lot of examples from the work that I do and my background into that class. And so, I can kind of pick out folks that I think are excited and interested. And so that's one way I'm able to. But, outside of that, I have a website, and my email is on the UVA server. So you can come and take a look at it and reach out. And if you're interested, we'll have a conversation. We have a lot of undergraduates doing research. And what's cool, UVA has amazing students. So if they start in the first year, by the time they're a fourth year, man, they're really, really doing great work.
So could you list 1 or 2 examples of projects that your undergraduates are working on? Are they working on materials for submarines, spacecraft?
Yes. Yeah. All of them.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah, absolutely. I can give you an idea. I just had a phenomenal student, Laura Oha. She is still with us. She's a material science undergraduate student, and she was started and working on assisting on the NAS program on the 5000 series environmental cracking program, and then she had an opportunity that she went out and actually then did a summertime internship with a colleague of mine out in Oxford, and she's just had some incredible opportunities. Now she's going to go out and work in an engineering consulting company, much to my chagrin, because I would have loved for her to come back and work in a PhD student. But that's one of the great benefits of being in a R1 university is you can have those experiences. And I really highly encourage undergraduate students to reach out to the faculty and get involved. There's so much great stuff going on in the engineering school, and it's really neat to be able to be a part of that.
Thank you, Jamie. Coleen, same question. For students interested in your work, You mentioned your lab. How do they get involved? And maybe you can give an indication of the stuff that they'd be doing.
Well, I'm proud to have a mostly undergraduate lab. So I came to UVA 18 months ago, and before that I was at a primarily undergraduate institution and also a polytechnic in California, Cal Poly. So I'm very proud to have mentored over 35 undergraduate students, and the last 4 out of my last 8 papers have been co-authored with my undergraduate students. So I'm really I'm proud of that. And one thing I do is I try to recruit students who have taken an ethnographic methods class with me, which I've taught at my former institution, and as part of the Engineering and Society Department's new minor for Science, Technology, and Society. I have started the first methods class in ethnography here in the School of Engineering and Applied Science. So that's how students, if they can, I cast a wide net. That's a really important part of hiring, I think, is making sure you don't hire people that look just like you. So you make sure that you cast a wide net and make people feel welcome to even apply. And then, so I've done that. I had six undergraduate students for working with me last semester. I also encourage students to take my methods class, because once they understand where I'm coming from, the methodological theory, and also I give undergraduate students the ethnographic methods that they can use, tools that they can use in their life, not just in research, to understand self-reflexivity, understand who you are, your positionality in the world, and how that affects the science, the problems that you choose, the interpretations of those problems once you have data. And so the students who take my class really not only get my managerial style, get my leadership style, but they understand the theory that I'm building on and trying to contribute to. So I just recommend that students reach out to me, just like Jimmy said, and show an interest in using both qualitative and quantitative skills in order to understand the world and be able to contribute to the world using theory.
So for students who are listening, so you said quantitative and qualitative work. So what does it look like?
Ethnography.
Yeah.
Ethnography is a qualitative research method developed by anthropologists in the 1800s. And it's used to study culture. So it's very unique in that it's not trying to study behavior, norms, values, and aspirations, and what the good life is in a community. That's what culture is, and that's what we use ethnography to study. And those methods are interviews, group interviews, individual interviews, life. I really loved life history interviews. Also, built environment analysis. You can study buildings to see how they shape the human meaning and also are shaped by them. And also, finally, we use content analysis a lot too. So one thing that my students are doing in my lab right now is they're collecting evidence and making an archive of how computer scientists describe what they do in the world as magic. And they're collecting a large archive of that to try to understand what the meaning of that expensive public relations campaign is. How computational machinery can be spun as magic is something I'm very curious about.
Great. Liheng, same question. Your lab.
So typically, I would try to find a way to really identify the interest. And this is often done through a sort of like 2 ways. One is a personal conversation. Then second one is that in-depth understanding of what we are doing by following a senior student. And this will really allow them to gain a sort of idea on what it is the work they're liking to do, right? And once they determine to come to my lab, then we will have to design a very careful program to train them.
So Jimmy and Coleen talked about pathways into their labs, and they mentioned courses. So for students that are interested in working with you, are there some gateway courses that you would recommend?
So no, typically for us, we work on soft materials which typically don't have a unified gateway course, but we do train them in the lab. And we do hands-on training and also do the knowledge training for them by using,
And so in terms of the background, if there isn't, say, a gateway course, what sorts of skills would you expect for a beginning student in your lab?
We really don't expect any kind of skills, but what we do expect is that we do expect to have some kind of knowledge in the, say, chemistry or material science or background. And then they're willing to learn new things. That's the most important thing, because what we're doing is really not in textbook.
Good. Would you describe the work that you do as like play for the students that?
Yeah, it's more like that. It's more like that. So they will start with something they are really most familiar with, and then gradually that become really deep in one field.
Well, this has been great. We could honestly talk for many, many more minutes, but our time is limited. And so with that in mind, I'd like to move on and ask a question that I basically ask every guest that's on the podcast. So Liheng, Jimmy, and Coleen, hobby, family, some interesting fun fact that you'd like to share. Liheng, I'll lead off with you.
Oh yeah, sure. So when I was single, I love jogging, and I love jogging along Charles River in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and that's how I met my wife. She was a coastal river. I was basically we're a coastal river. And after we have 2 kids, right? So now life has been changed all the way through. But now we try to manage to do the swimming every day.
Oh.
And I also read an article from Nature interviewing you, right? Ken,
yeah, I know something about swimming.
Yeah. So saying that you are really using mathematics to really help Olympic swimmers go faster. We're not good swimmer, but we just exercise by ourselves. Wow. But this really help us to relieve from the work.
Oh, good. Well, it's a great skill. We were never meant to swim, right? Michael Phelps is doing his very best to swim 6 miles an hour for 45 seconds. A sailfish can go 80 miles an hour without trying. So that's what I like about it. And maybe your kids will enjoy this too. Swimming is hard. And with a little bit of thought and practice, you can get a whole lot better mastering a new environment, the water, right? You're not fighting gravity as much as you're fighting drag. And I really like that. Coleen, fun fact.
Sure. One of my hobbies, I have 2 major hobbies. One's reading novels and the other is photography. And my dad, when he had the bookstore, he also developed film. So he used to give me free film to use, and then he would develop all my photos and just really encouraged me to just be experimental and play with it. And I think what I love about having a hobby like that is when your job is something that you want to be the best in the world at, that you want to contribute major support to people who have been leading social movements for decades, it's really a lot of pressure. But I love having a hobby of photography is that it's low stakes, and when I create something that I like, that's good enough. I don't have to go through a review process or have to respond to other people's recommendations. I can just revel in the joy I find in what I've produced. Finally, the photography helped me through the pandemic. So I lived on the coast of California, and I was in lockdown with my Chihuahua, and we would go to Morro Bay Beach, Dog Beach, every single day, and I would take photographs. And now my office and my home now is surrounded by that California beach under many different weather conditions, and it brings me great joy, and it helps me persist and survive.
Oh, beautiful. Jimmy, fun fact.
Fun fact, and what do I like to do? I think outside of work, probably my biggest investment of time is, very family-oriented, and my wife and I have 3 wonderful kids, 2 boys and a little girl. And they're kind of meatheads just like their dad, and so they love sports, and so they play all of the different sports. And I guess, my oldest son is in high school now, so it's not able to coach him, but I have coached all of my kids in 1, maybe 2 sports every season since they have started. And so
Do they have a favorite sport?
Oh, they love everything. But wrestling and football and lacrosse, my boys enjoy. And then my daughter has played soccer and lacrosse and gymnastics. And so
great.
One of the things I love about coaching is that, you have an opportunity to obviously be there and spend time with my kids, but also impact a younger generation, and building kind of a safe learning space. Kids don't even understand that they're learning it, but they're understanding the tie between, a good attitude, a tie between hard work, a tie between effort and giving their best and that kind of stuff, and the results. And that's something I think our society and our kids need, is to be able to learn those skills in a safe spot and, recognize, hey, you can do everything right and still fail, and that's okay. That doesn't mean you do anything different along the way.
So it's interesting. The 3 of you have very different paths to success. So Coleen was inspired by a childhood in a bookstore. And I have to believe, Jimmy, that if we were to ask you, did your experience playing team sports somehow model your worldview and how you approach your science? My guess is you'd say absolutely.
No, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah. So Liheng, in your youth, was there a similar story that you can tell?
Yeah, so I play Tai Chi and Kung Fu almost every day, every morning when I was younger. And this really helped me to clear my mind and identify the peacefulness which belongs to myself. And most important is that I realized that it can help me manage my many things, such as temper and also the physical strength and flexibility, which allow me to do like a more work when needed.
Right, so it helps you focus. Well, I think it's time to wrap up. So thank you all for sharing. Congratulations for your presidential honors, each of you. Obviously, you're fulfilling President Ryan's mission for the university to be both great and good. I think it's absolutely clear that you are great, and the goodness of your work in terms of its benevolence to society is clear. So thank you for your service. I'm Ken Ono, STEM advisor to the provost and the Marvin Rosenblum Professor of Mathematics, and you've been listening to Who's in STEM.
Who's in STEM is a production of WTJU 91.1 FM and the Office of the Provost at the University of Virginia. Who's in STEM is produced by Catherine Kosseboom, Claire Curzon, Benjamin Larson, Mary Gardner-McGee, Katie Nichols, and Ria Verma. Our music is composed and performed by Robert Schneider and John Ferguson of Apples and Stereo. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Listen and subscribe to Who's in STEM on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be back soon with another conversation about scientific and technological innovation at the university.